Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is Victor Shi. It is Tuesday, June 13th, and today the number we focus on is 37 because Donald Trump has been charged with 37 different federal counts for what he did in the Mar-a-Lago investigation case. Those charges range from the willful retention of documents to obstruction of justice to retention of classified information. And no, it wasn't Joe Biden that did this to Donald Trump. No, it was not Merrick Garland that did this to Donald Trump or some deep state. This was because of Donald Trump's behavior and his behavior only. And because of his actions, Donald Trump is expected to be arraigned along with his co-conspirator, Walt Nauta, in Miami, Florida, where he will once again make history. And joining me to talk about this history unfolding right before our very own eyes is my good friend and justice and democracy warrior, Alison Gill, otherwise known as Mueller, she wrote. Alison, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on this truly, I think, big and historic day.
It is definitely an historic day, and thanks, Victor, and thank you and your movement and everybody in Gen Z for helping get Joe Biden elected so that we could appoint Merrick Garland, so we could appoint Jack Smith, so we could help hold some of these folks accountable, including Donald.
Absolutely. And we need 4 more years of that. But I want to start with this whole kind of moment that we find ourselves in. And for those who may just be kind of tuning in, who maybe don't really know this case, the ins and outs, give those people kind of a brief overview of what the Mar-a-Lago investigation kind of is about and kind of what's at stake here.
Sure. The interesting thing here is there would be no indictment had Donald just handed back the documents when the National Archives wanted them, or the second time when the Department of Justice subpoenaed him. This whole indictment is about what I call the fact that Nauta and Trump played musical boxes with national defense information to trick and mislead his own lawyers and law enforcement. That obstruction is why we have the 31 counts under the Espionage Act of retaining classified information. We don't see anything here about dissemination. We don't see anything about the pool being drained. It's all about this obstruction of justice and not giving the documents back. And that's what sets it apart from the case against the investigation into Biden's handling of classified documents and former Vice President Mike Pence's handling of them.
I mean, it's shocking that it's just that simple of a case, that if he only turned them over, we wouldn't be in this situation. But I want to ask you about Jack Smith, because now would be a good time, if people don't know who he is, to probably know about him. You host a podcast literally about Jack and kind of the special counsel's investigation. Give those who may not understand kind of a brief introduction about who Jack Smith is and why he's kind of not what Republicans are portraying him to be right now.
Well, he's a longtime prosecutor. He worked doing prosecutions, moved to the Public Integrity Unit, or the PIN, where he actually worked with Jim Trusty, one of Donald Trump's lawyers for a while. Yeah. And then after that, we know that he ended up prosecuting crimes at The Hague, and actually found a warlord over there guilty of war crimes. But on the other side, so it's not as black and white as everybody thinks it is, but he is just a longtime prosecutor. He's gone after, when he was the Public Integrity Unit, he went after people like former Governor Ken McDonnell. He was the person who went after the John Edwards case. And so he's brought several charges against high profile political figures, and also not brought charges against high profile political figures. Which is just as important, because he doesn't bring a case unless it's there. And he's not afraid, clearly, to go for the charges when the facts and the law are on his side, as he said in his very brief press conference, which is why I think Andrew Weissman, who I agree with on this, is saying that because this indictment went down, he's 100% certain that January 6th indictments will also happen, because he is not afraid. There's no fear or favor here.
Very interesting. I want to ask about January 6th, but I want to focus on the Mar-a-Lago indictment, because it's so damning. And last Thursday, we learned that Trump was indicted, which is probably the most accurate thing he's ever said on Truth Social. But at that point, the indictment was still unsealed. But what was your initial reaction to hearing the initial charges being kind of swirled around against Trump last Thursday?
Much like every reporter, we were scrambling to verify Trump's statements, because if you remember, he got it wrong in New York when he said, I'm going to be indicted on Tuesday. And that just wasn't the case. So he's, now the boy who cried indictment instead of the boy who cried wolf. But so we were all trying to verify this, even though we sort of knew it was coming from previous reporting being ramped up that whole past week. But that's what we were doing, scrambling. And then I think it was finally either NBC or the Wall Street Journal who confirmed through his attorneys that he has in fact been indicted, but that none of them had seen it. And then I think one of the lawyers spoke to somebody over at ABC who said what the charges were going to be under the Espionage Act, under obstruction, 1512, not just 1519, which is witness tampering. And then, also the false statements charges. And so then there was a little bit of a misinformation about 7 counts. And then experts pointed out there's 7 crimes. There could be multiple counts under the Espionage Act, depending on how many documents they bring. And we were all sort of expecting there to be 3, 4, 5 documents. That's generally typical in these cases. To find out there's 31 that they decided to use, no one's ever seen anything quite like that. So there will be, I'm sure, if there's a conviction, sentencing recommendations to go above and beyond the normal sentencing because of the sheer number and sensitivity of these documents.
Very interesting. And then on Friday, of course, the indictment dropped and included direct quotes from audio tapes, photos. I mean, so many things that would help a prosecutor and kind of this case. But what did you make of kind of what we saw? What should people kind of take away from that indictment? I know you've been saying a lot on Twitter that you should read the indictment before you talk about it. For those who maybe haven't read it, what are some of the most important kind of takeaways or top lines that people should know about?
Yeah, again, top line, musical boxes. It was obstruction. But also the things that are not in it, as I said before, there's no dissemination here. And that doesn't mean there might not be. Those things could still be under investigation. There could be superseding indictments, although I tend to think not, because Jack Smith has said, this is it. We're looking for a speedy trial. We're going to get this over and done with. And so I tend to think this may not be an ongoing investigation. And these are the charges that they're going to bring against Donald, that it was the obstruction. It was the musical boxes that got them the search warrant in the first place, the video surveillance tape. So I think that this was the case that they were working on, and this is the case that they brought in. I think this might be the end of the road for the documents case. Although, keep in mind, there are still counterintelligence risk assessments going on in the intelligence community. I'm sure they're still trying to get back those documents that we still don't have. But we generally don't hear too much about counterintelligence. There's not indictments out of the counterintelligence investigations. They generally make an assessment like, this is a serious counterintelligence risk, and then they brief the Gang of 8, or this is not, or, and then they make they draw their conclusions that way, usually in classified reports that we have no idea about. And there are many times, and I've talked to several experts about this, that they will not bring charges in favor of keeping that source a secret, to say it's better to let this criminal go than to burn this source or to endanger the sources and methods of the document that we would have to show in court. So the ones that they picked very purposefully. And we're going to have a chat on the next Jack episode with Brian Greer, who, as you know, is a former CIA general counsel who can talk about those procedures, about what it looks like in court. But top line, again, it was the obstruction. It's the cover up is worse than the crime. One thing I want to mention, which I think is interesting, Bill Barr put out a memo in 2019 about the Mueller obstruction of justice case and said, even if he was not president, even if we could charge him, we wouldn't, because in order to have obstruction of justice, there has to be an underlying crime. And that is a full-on current OLC memo in the Department of Justice. This indictment is not subject to that because of the Espionage Act. He brought the 31 documents up. That is the underlying crime, retention of national defense information. So that is how they completely sack the Barr memo, and they don't have to worry about it at all.
Wow, that's extraordinary. I didn't know about that, but that is really fascinating. And of course, now Bill Barr is also quite outspoken about just kind of the strength of the evidence in this case. And for those who haven't read it yet, I mean, take some time and read it. It's a speaking indictment. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be, someone who has known this case, the ins and outs. It's really such a clear and concise piece of document, and hopefully we can get everyone to read it. But I want to get into some of the narratives that we've seen from Republicans, because it's been so disturbing and depressing to me to see how Republicans have twisted this. And I mean, the one that I've been seeing time and time again, I'm sure you've seen this too, is just how many comparisons are being made to Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Mike Pence, just to kind of set the record straight. How is this case not similar to Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Mike Pence's case?
Well, first of all, in sheer volume of classified information.
Yeah.
And second of all, Hillary gave over all of her emails. It took a year, but she did it. They've got from back and forth from lawyers, all legal stuff. But they eventually got everything. And they determined there was no intent, willful intent, where there was here. She wasn't using a private server to mask her hoarding of classified documents. She was just doing her business. That's the difference. It's kind of the same thing with Martha Stewart. You know, she didn't have any classified information, but it was that she tried to cover up indications of insider trading, not the insider trading itself. So again, you don't need an underlying crime. Bill Barr is wrong on that. But I'd be interested to see anybody who's helping Bill Barr on his rehab tour. Just ask him, oh, I thought you wrote a memo saying there had to be an underlying crime. How does this go around that, sir? You know, I would love to give, you know, because Mueller's obstruction outlay in volume 2 is just as strong as this one.
Yeah. So let's talk about today, because today, again, history is in the making. We're going to see Trump arraigned. Walk us through what we can expect to see today and in some of the kind of coming weeks in terms of this Mar-a-Lago case specifically.
Well, not much today, because last night, late night, a judge made a decision that phones won't even be allowed, not just recordings,
yes,
not just video, but not even phones will be allowed in the arraignment. My understanding is that there will now not be a mugshot. He will not be handcuffed. We probably won't see any kind of a perp walk. It's going to be a lot like New York, but a lot less reported on, because now our reporters on the ground are not allowed to have their phones inside the courtroom. There are still pushes to go up to the 11th Circuit. 11th Circuit, who releases their same-day recordings and sometimes live streams their stuff, to get them to force the lower court to do this. But there's just going to be a lot of back and forth with court filings and briefings from either the press or perhaps the DOJ, but probably not so much. I think they probably want to stay out of that, to see if we can get more information as it happens. Yeah, because that's important for the credibility of the case, particularly since Eileen Cannon has been. Yeah.
Can you talk about that part more, the Eileen Cannon one overseeing this case? I mean, there's been a lot of concerns about her past rulings and her ability to kind of be on this case in a fair and objective manner. What kind of should people know about her, and what do you think is going to kind of be what's this case going to be like with her overseeing this, do you think?
Well, she made 2 absolutely ridiculous rulings back when when Donald Trump was trying to get a special master appointed, and specifically, mostly on standing and what's called jurisdiction. The court didn't even have the jurisdiction to do it. The 11th Circuit agreed and overturned 2 of her rulings, giving back all the documents and getting rid of the special master and making her vacate her orders, which was it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to us, but to the 11th Circuit and to that district court, that's a huge black eye. It's bad. The 11th Circuit could step in here. I don't know, probably not. 11th Circuit is very conservative, and they still overturned. Two of the 3 judges were Trump appointees. They still overturned her rulings because they were just so egregiously bad. And so it'll be interesting to see how she handles this. The difference here is that in that, in that case, she didn't read the affidavit, the search warrant affidavit. So she could have some sort of plausible deniability. If they came to her and said, why did you make this dumb ruling? She could be like, well, I don't have all the information. I'm going by the information I have. In this case, she will not have the information. All of the information will be presented to her in multiple, because there's classified or national defense information and secret documents, sensitive information involved. There will be huge meetings and briefings in camera. She will not be able to put her fingers in her ears and make bad judgments saying that she doesn't have all the information. That can't happen here. So it's going to be really interesting to see how she handles this. Of course, Donald Trump's goal is to delay. And so, if he files, motions to dismiss or motions in limine to exclude certain evidence like the audio tapes because they're his or whatever, she could set a really long, a briefing schedule with a long tail,
Mm,
and because it's kind of up to her on how that all works out. So it'll be
yeah,
interesting to see, but we have quite a bit of time between now and the election to
yeah.
get this done. So
And do you think we will get it done before the election?
I hope so.
Yeah.
There could be tricks up sleeves that I am not smart enough to know about yet for delay tactics. I mean, we've seen most of them. He's been to court so many times. We kind of know his tricks, but he's got a relatively good defense attorney now that he just brought on, and so we'll see if that person is able to advise him, because when you don't have the law, pound the facts. If you don't have the
Yeah.
facts, pound the desk. And so that's, I think, what we're going to see is just delay, and prosecutorial misconduct. It's blame the cops.
Yeah. You mentioned the lawyer, and that's the kind of the last question I want to ask you about. At least in this case, he got this defense lawyer yesterday. Is there any plausible sort of justification or explanation that you think they can come up with that will sway the jury in any way? Or do you think Jack Smith has pretty much built such an open and shut case that no matter what they say, it'll be basically, in against Trump?
This is a pretty open and shut case. It's going to depend on the jurors. The jurors have
Yeah.
heard a lot of "these are mine." They've heard a lot of the Presidential Records Act makes these mine. I can declassify things with my
With my
mind.
mind.
They've heard all this. It's in there, right? And at least a lot of them, a lot of people. And Florida is a friendlier place to try a case for Trump than DC. Although the jury pool does skew Democratic, but again, this is an apolitical case in my mind. If you all remember Manafort, he was facing 18 counts, and there was a huge Trump fan on the jury, and she said, "I left my MAGA hat at the door," and she was hung on 7 counts but convicted on 11. And she's like, "Look, documents are documents.
Yeah.
I can't, these." Hopefully, the jury will do its job. If the jury does its job, this is an open and shut case.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Let's quickly talk about some of the other cases against Trump. There's Fani Willis, there's January 6th, Letitia James. What is kind of a quick update on those, and do you expect to see any movement anytime soon?
Well, Tish James just told the Pod Save America guys that it is likely that her case and Alvin Bragg's case and Fani Willis's case will have to adjourn until the conclusion of this federal case. This is very common. I don't want anybody to worry. It's often that state and local prosecutors defer to federal charges and wait to see what happens, so that if they bring their cases and they have some sort of dual sovereign rules in their state where they can't try people for the same crimes, they fill in the gaps with the other ones. But I do think Fani Willis will still indict in the first early weeks of August, just to get them filed, get the charges filed, for statute of limitations concerns and stuff like that. But then wait and see. Then we'll see rolling cases. And Donald Trump is going to be going through this for probably the rest of his life.
Oh gosh. If I'm 21 now, which means I can drink legally, and if I was with you, I would be sharing some sort of drink with you, but we can soak this moment in. This is happy indictment, or I guess happy arraignment day to all who celebrate. Alison Gill.
I do want to say really quick,
Yeah.
Victor, before you go, I want to give people the permission to celebrate. These are very serious charges. There's very serious implications to national security, to our men and women and people in uniform. Very serious implications. But it's okay to celebrate the rule of law.
Yes, yes.
And I want to just make that distinction. So yes, I am very happy. I'm happy about justice and the rule of law.
Yeah. And that our system still works, and even former presidents cannot skirt our laws. Alison Gill, thank you so much for joining me this morning, and thank you again for all that you do. I know we will all be watching your Twitter feed very closely, and please join me again sometime soon. This has been awesome.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I appreciate you, Victor.
Of course. Thanks so much, AG.
Mhm.
Well, like we said, today history is in the making, and thank you, Alison Gill, for joining me this morning. Again, you can follow her at Mueller, She Wrote. She also hosts the Daily Beans podcast, as well as Jack, which is a podcast about Jack Smith. She does it with Andrew McCabe, who is a former deputy FBI director, I believe is his title. But it's a great podcast, and I know they have a lot more coming where that comes from. And she's mentioned that she's going to have on the former CIA general counsel to talk about sort of the more procedural elements of all of this, and some of the kind of more ins and the nitty gritty with this case. So follow that podcast and follow her Daily Beans podcast. Those are great podcasts. And everything that Mueller, She Wrote, and everything that Alison Gill does is truly extraordinary. So thank you, AG, for joining me this morning. We'll be following this case very closely. Like she said, it's a bit of a disappointment that there won't be any phones or any kind of, electronic devices in the courtroom today. So we'll all kind of have to watch as, maybe he goes in, but at least during the actual kind of moment where reporters are in the courtroom, we won't be able to kind of have any real-time updates, which I think is definitely, like I said, a disappointment. But I'll bring those updates to you. I know so will many other reporters on Twitter. So follow that space. We have some great episodes coming for you in this next week. Tomorrow we have an episode with Malcolm Nance. Thursday we will have an episode with S.E. Cupp, and on Friday we will talk about kind of the weekly roundup of news with Representative Jasmine Crockett and everything that's going on in the House. So don't miss those episodes. They'll be live at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, right here on YouTube.com/Politicon or on Twitter. Like I've said before, this show is now on Twitter at Victor She 2020, which is my Twitter handle. So you can watch both ways. If you're not on YouTube, you can watch on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, you can watch on YouTube Live every morning. Thank you all for watching. Again, this is a historic day. There's so much, I guess, to be somber about, especially with kind of where we are in this moment. It's sad that we even reached this point in our country where we have a former president about to be indicted for the first time under federal charges. But like AG said, we all should have permission to celebrate just a little bit because our justice system, our legal system, our rule of law are all still intact, and that is a good thing. So go forth, go celebrate. But I will see you all tomorrow, and have a great rest of your Tuesday.